studies the partition of India, isn't it? And partition of India means when did it occur? 1947. But from a very special angle, women's experiences, most history books talk about leaders, politics, and borders, isn't it? But this book instead asks what happened to ordinary women during partition. That's the first thing. Second thing, or second question, how did violence, migration, and loss affect these women's life? Can you please shut the door? So, how did violence, migration, and loss affect their lives? Whose lives? These women's, right? And third question is called as a how were women treated by families, communities, and the state, isn't it? You must have seen many of the movies that reflect uh, the condition of the woman made in the families, communities, and the state, isn't it? So, the authors in this book actually use interviews, memories, and personal stories of women who lived through partition to, tell the history. So, if I talk about the main idea of the book argues that partition was not only a political event, it was also deeply personal and emotional tragedy. Even women suffered in unique ways that history often ignores. So the authors want to make women visible in history. The authors want not just women as victims, but as real people with voices and choices. Voices and choices. Hence, if I talk about the main themes explained in this book, that gives us the idea, it's called as a woman's voice matter, or sorry, women's voices matter. Right. Now, traditional history focuses on men and politics. Right. But this book focuses on women's memories and storage. Memories and storage. So the authors believe that what women are not just part of history, women create history, women through their life experiences create history, isn't it? Therefore, the authors give us the idea that how violence held against a woman. During partition, many women were how violence occurred. लड़कियों के साथ वायलेंस कैसे होता है? लड़कियों को या तो वुमेन को एब्डक्ट किया जाता है. एब्डक्ट का मतलब क्या है? किडनैप किया जाता है, रेप होता है, अब्यूज होता है, फिजिकली मेंटली अब्यूज किया जाता है. तो ये सारे चीज वायलेंस के एग्जाम्पल्स हैं. तो दिस gives us the idea that women were abducted, women were raped, women were forced into marriages, right? Or even conversions. Conversions का मतलब क्या होता है? हिंदू हो मुस्लिम में कन्वर्ट हो कर लो, मुस्लिम हो तो हिंदू में, isn't it? So some were killed by their own families. You must have seen Gadar. The initial means film, when the film initiated or the film began, you find out how the Punjabi person gave or Punjabi woman gave poison to two of the daughters. That whatever happened, you shall not lose your reputation or shall not be raped by the Muslims. Isn't it? Before certain things happen, you take the poison. तो ये भी एक हुआ है, और ऐसा भी हुआ है कि एक हिंदू ने मुस्लिम को शादी कर लिया, तो मुस्लिम के फैमिली वाले मुस्लिम लड़की को मीन्स होता है ना, इवन टुडे ऑल्सो यू फाइंड आउट इन some of the states who considered the kind of a biased with the caste, isn't it? But we were talking about the partition. तो यहाँ पे वही चीज पॉइंट आउट किया जा रहा है कि women were killed by their own families. Why? ना protecting their honors. Honors का मतलब क्या होता है? Reputation, इज्जत कहा जाता है. So, hence we can consider that this book shows how women's bodies become or became means symbols of community honor. Community honor का मतलब क्या है? आप जिस सोसाइटी में रहते हो, हिंदू कम्युनिटी हो, मुस्लिम कम्युनिटी हो, सिख कम्युनिटी हो, क्रिश्चियन कम्युनिटी हो या ईसाई कम्युनिटी हो, सो कम्युनिटी का एक ऑनर होता है, राइट? एंड कम्युनिटी अगर वो ऑनर लूज जाता है, और दैट्स समथिंग कॉल्ड एज यू लूज इट, सो दे फील अशेम ऑफ इट. सो देयरफॉर मींस, एंड कौन सा चीज को आप ऑनर कहते हो? वुमेन बॉडीज को, isn't it? So that's what is known as the violence against women. So this book exemplifies that. Another thing is called as a loss and displacement. Loss हमें पता है, displacement तो हमें पता है कि partitions did what? Now partition still now a kind of a negative memories in the mind of the people, whether that people live in India or live in Pakistan, still they consider it's nothing but a negative memory. So when you say loss and displacement, we talk about what are the losses? Homes. You lose your home where you settled for years, decades, isn't it? Your parents, right, forefather, right, who live that place for centuries. So second age called as not only your homes, but also agricultural land, or simply अगर कहें तो land भी, है कि नहीं? So even friends भी lose कर रहे हो. Displacement of your home, land, friends, communities, and a sense of belonging. एक अटैचमेंट होता है ना अपने कम्युनिटी, अपने जगह के ऊपर, वो भी आप लॉस कर रहे हो, वो भी आपका डिस्प्लेसमेंट हो रहा है. ठीक है? सो उस हिसाब से अगर देखा जाए, violence against women we understood, loss and displacement that happens of home, land, and friends, communities. Then you talk about a sense of belonging, isn't it? So for many women, losing relationships hurt more than losing property, right? You lose your children, you lose your husband, you lose your parents, isn't it? So relationships are lost here. So the first one you understood violence, second one loss and displacement. Then third one, this book gives us the idea that called as a recovery and rehabilitation. Recovery and rehabilitation. So हमें पता है कि रिकवरी का मतलब क्या हो कि कोई वुमेन को अबडक्ट किया गया उसको उद्धार किया जाए रिहैबिलिटेशन उद्धार करने के बाद उसको कहीं पे रखा भी जाएगा राइट तो गवर्नमेंट्स आफ्टर पार्टीशन ये रिकवरी एंड रिहैबिलिटेशन कब हुआ ना आफ्टर पार्टीशन तो गवर्नमेंट्स ट्राई टू रिकवर abducted women abducted समझ में आया so some women did not want to even return so some had new families and children isn't it now understand that you find out the movie called Gadar where the woman was separated from her husband and child and was present in the Pakistan right she wanted to come back but her parents do not her parents wanted her to get into the marriage again remarry isn't it so that shows what abducted some women wanted to return some women wanted to remarry and make the family and children isn't it so in that case what this all happened after partition right so this raises very difficult questions that what who decides where a woman belongs हम और तुम डिसाइड नहीं कर सकते कि एक लड़की किस हिसाब से जिएगी isn't it हम और तुम ये नहीं आज का जो ट्रेंड है राइट वी कैन नॉट make a claim that how she should wear the dress, how she should means present herself, isn't it? This considered as the racism, this considered as a biased prejudice, isn't it? So यहाँ पे भी वही question है, hard question that who decides where a woman belongs? So is it the woman who decides herself? That whether I should stay here or stay there, whether I would marry again or whether I would means, make my family to meet again, right or not, or to join with them. So, or it is the family's family. Sorry, it is the woman's family. Family decide करेगा. So, third is called as the nation, or the nation decide करेगा. कौन डिसाइड करेगा कि एक लड़की और एक वुमन किस हिसाब से जिएगी कहां से बिलोंग करेगी isn't it so that's again indicating the recovery and rehabilitation where the book criticizes right the book criticizes how the state controlled state का मतलब क्या होता है हो सकता है नेशन को रेफर कर रहा है so controlled women's lives in the name of what? In the name of nation building. देश बना रहे हैं देश किस हिसाब से बना रहे हैं ना by creating separation by creating violence by creating means of by making politics isn't it now I don't want to go into the present politics right but as we were talking about this ये सब जो चीज हुआ है वो वायलेंस लॉस डिस्प्लेसमेंट अब्यूज ये सब जो चीज हुआ है इन द नेम ऑफ व्हाट क्रिएटिंग टू डिफरेंट नेशंस डेवलपिंग नेशन राइट दैट्स व्हाट तो that is what again called as a recovery and rehabilitation fine now the next is called as a gender and nation if I talk about this book also shows nations were built like you find out India Pakistan Bangladesh right so they were built on ideas of what? Purity and honor. Right? So women were made symbols of these ideas, and women were considered the honor of the nation, honor of the community, honor of the family. So, and purity also. So, third is called as their personal wishes were often, लड़कियों का जो विशेष है वो ऑफन क्या होता है, इग्नोर किया जाता है, क्योंकि तुम लोगों का जो ओपिनियन वो मायना नहीं रखता है, फैमिली में भी हो, कम्युनिटी में भी हो और नेशन बिल्डिंग में भी हो. क्यों? क्योंकि तुम लोग लड़कियां. That's a kind of a criticism I am making here. I'm not saying that what, yes, it is justified. No, it is never. It cannot be considered as a justified statement that your opinion means has no value, right? Or should be ignored. So partition was also about what? Control over women's abilities. है कि नहीं? लड़कियों का जो एबिलिटीज होता है, लड़कियों का जो आइडेंटिटीज होता है, उसके ऊपर कंट्रोल करने की कोशिश किया गया है, राइट? तो दैट्स व्हाट पार्टीशन टीचेस, राइट? द बुक गिव्स अस द आइडिया. सो देयरफॉर अगर मैं इस बुक के इंपोर्टेंस के बारे में कहूं, पार्टीशन के बारे में, सो इट चेंजेस हाउ वी सी हिस्ट्री. हम हिस्ट्री को किस हिसाब से देखते हैं वो चेंज करता है अपना परसेप्शन, हमारा जो परसेप्शन, हमारा जो थॉट प्रोसेस, राइट? सो इंस्टेड ऑफ इट सेज दैट पार्टीशन इज द डेट एंड लीडर्स पॉलिटिक्स, राइट? It tries to tell us that to look into the partition, you find out emotions, you find out trauma. Trauma means shock, right? You find out how human suffering, किस हिसाब से लोग सफर कर रहे हैं, isn't it? So that's what you would find out the important aspect of this book. So the authors in this book actually you interviewed survivors. सर्वाइवर्स का मतलब क्या होता है? जो लोग बच गए हैं, जो लड़कियां और जो वुमेन बच गए हैं, उनका इंटरव्यू लिया गया है और उनका जो स्टोरीज है, और वो स्टोरीज पॉइंट आउट करता है कि कितना इमोशनल, हाउ दे आर इमोशनल, हाउ मींस देयर स्टोरीज आर समटाइम इनकम्प्लीट, isn't it? How means these women's stories are emotional, incomplete, but powerful, isn't it? Why powerful? Because it will change your means a thought process, and it will change means the perception of an individual. So therefore, अगर मैं इस बुक के बारे में कहूँ, so I can say that what it is a feminist history, right? Feminist history का मतलब फीमेल के ऊपर पॉइंट आउट किया गया. So the book asks that what is history the same for men as for the woman, right? जिस हिसाब से ये लड़कों को उतना इम्पोर्टेंस देता है, मेन को जितना इम्पोर्टेंस देता है, वुमेन को उतना इम्पोर्टेंस देता है, इक्वालिटी मेंटेन किया है? No, the answer is no, purely, right? Because women experience events differently. Women experience events differently, and history must reflect that, right? So, all total, agar may means we can talk about that how and what this book teaches us. This book Partition teaches us. I can say that पार्टीशन वॉज नॉट जस्ट अबाउट बॉर्डर्स. पार्टीशन सिर्फ बॉर्डर को डिवाइड नहीं कर रहा है. सो इट वॉज अबाउट ब्रोकन लाइफ्स एंड आइडेंटिटीज. ब्रोकन लाइफ्स एंड आइडेंटिटीज. तो हम एक लाइफ जी रहे हैं, लेकिन उस लाइफ में कोई घुस रहा है, हमें सेपरेट कर रहा है, तो हमारा लाइफ तो इनकम्प्लीट हुआ ना. सो हमारे पर्सनल ओपिनियन मैटर नहीं करता है, तो हमारा इंडिविजुअलिटी क्या रहा? हमारा आइडेंटिटी क्या रहा, isn't it? So women paid a very high price here, and their stories deserve to be heard. That is the reason. Find out the authors write their stories, right? And to point out that what borders divided countries, but boundaries controlled human lives, right? Divided countries, but boundaries control women's lives, right? So that's what you would find out. The first unit, if you go, which is stated about speaking for themselves, आपका पहला unit जो है, right? So वो पहला unit, I hope you understood the complete idea of the book. क्या कहना चाहता है, why this book is written, the book is written about who, right? What the importance about them, right? How they have been compared, isn't it? All such kind of a thing. Now we'll go for the broad elaboration of it. So the first unit is stated about speaking for themselves, isn't it? So partition history, Oman's histories, and means like you can say that partition histories and women's histories. So the the topic stated that speaking for themselves is about what, looking at the partition of India, not just through politics and leaders, but through the lives of ordinary women. Usually, history books talk about what? Talk about what? History books talks what? Dates, dates, agreements, treaty, dates, agreements, treaties, and famous men, right? So, but this book says that what, or this particular section says that what, such history hides the real pain. Such history hides the real pain and experiences of people. लोगों का जो experience है, लोगों का जो real pain है, वो छुपाया गया है. ठीक है? Especially women. The authors explain that partition was a life-changing event, isn't it? So it forced millions to leave their homes, अपना घर छोड़ के जाओ. So broke relationship, like I said. So and created fear and violence between communities. एक कम्युनिटी दूसरे कम्युनिटी को डरता था, एक कम्युनिटी दूसरे कम्युनिटी में वायलेंस क्रिएट होता था. So while political history records what the governments and leaders did, लेकिन रिकॉर्ड में क्या है, गवर्नमेंट ने क्या किया, लीडर्स ने क्या किया, राइट? सो all such kind of a thing. It often ignores how common people suffered. Women, in particular, faced special difficulties like loss of family, displacement, violence, and insecurity. So, but their stories were rarely written down. So, this chapter argues what, that women's memories and personal stories are also history. So when women speak about what they saw and what they felt, जब वो बोलते हैं कि उन्होंने क्या देखा, उन्होंने क्या फील किया, तो वो मैटर करता है एंड वो हेल्प करता है समझने के लिए. दे हेल्प अस अंडरस्टैंड पार्टीशन, राइट, इन अ डीपर एंड मोर ह्यूमन वे, isn't it? So the experiences show that history is not the same for everyone. Right? A big event like partition affects men and women differently. So the authors also talk about how they collected. ऑथर भी यहाँ पे बोल रहे हैं कि उन्होंने किस हिसाब से स्टोरीज कलेक्ट किए, क्योंकि इतना इजी नहीं है, राइट? सो कलेक्टेड वुमेन स्टोरीज थ्रू इंटरव्यूज एंड कन्वर्सेशंस. Many women had never shared their memories before. So some were hesitant also. अगर देखा जाए, एक लड़की चूंकि एक हिनियस टेरिबल सिचुएशन से गुजरी हो तो वो उस चीज को दोहराना पसंद करेगा? No, never. So sometimes you would find out that Those women means never shared their memories before. Now they first time share it. Some even hesitate. Why? Because the memories were painful, right? But telling their stories helped bring out a side of history that official records do not show. Okay. So in that case, the topic teaches us that means history. The topic teaches us personal experiences. The topic teaches women's voices must be heard. The topic also states without women's stories, the picture of partition age incomplete, complete नहीं. So speaking for themselves, जो unit दिया गया, जो section दिया गया है, that gives us the idea, allow women, letting women tell their own history. So instead of others speaking for them, ये जो जैसा बोल पाएगी क्योंकि वो एक्सपीरियंस से गुजरी है, तो the other one cannot share her view indirectly, isn't it? So therefore, it is about giving value to their memories. It is giving value to their emotion. It is giving value to their struggles. It is, and also understanding that these are an important part of the past. So, speaking themselves just introduce that how means these women matter to the writers, matter to the authors, right? So they are not only telling about the history of the partition, they want to convey the message that things what are not mentioned in the history. जो चीज हिस्ट्री में दिया नहीं गया है वही चीज को वो दिखाना चाहते हैं. So that's what. Okay, so similar to that, second section को अगर हम पहुंचते हैं, so second section is about honorably dead. Honorably dead, permissible violence, right? Permissible violence against women. तो आप अगर देखोगे, the title itself is indicating that women were killed because of the honor, community honor, family's honor, and the nation's honor. So even violence occurred to the woman with the permission, not to the woman, but to the nation decide that we need to give the permission, violence, right? So this particular section talks about one of the most painful, one of the most disturbing realities. So realities of the partition of India. So this section shows how violence against women was not only done by enemies, right? So from other communities, but sometimes even by their own families, isn't it? Now, did you see that before the things occur, your family themselves request you to kill yours, isn't it? Before certain things occur. So, so that's what you would find out. During partition, many people believed that a woman's honor was more important than her life. लड़की का इज्जत लड़की के लाइफ से भी बहुत important, right? So because of this belief, families often thought death was better than the possibility of rape. Death was meant better than the possibility of abduction or forced conversion. तो तीन चीज बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, रेप, एब्डक्शन, कन्वर्शन, इजंट इट? अगर एक लड़की को रेप होता है उससे बेटर है वो मर जाए. अगर उसको किडनैप किया जाता है या उसका धर्म चेंज किया जाता है तो उससे बेटर है वो मर जाए, राइट? तो वो चाहे कम्युनिटी मार डाले उसको, राइट, या तो वो खुद सुसाइड करे, इजंट इट? सो इन दोज fearful days, rumors and real attacks created panic, right? Sometimes it happens also, एक लड़की का रेप भी नहीं हुआ होगा, उसको मीन्स रूमर के बेस पे मीन्स she felt shame, isn't it? So and sometimes also real attacks, real attacks, that also get panicked. Women were at a great risk of sexual violence. To protect family honor, some families forced women to kill themselves or killed them. Women jumped into wells. How did they commit suicide? They jumped into well, took poison, or were burnt or drowned. तो मरने का तरीका ये था poison, jumped into the well, were drowned, or you can say that took poison or were burned. Sometimes fathers, brothers, or husbands made these decisions. Who? Husband, fathers, and brothers. They decide that whether the woman has to leave or not. Right. So these acts were called as honorable death. Right. परिवार के इज्जत के लिए वो मर. Right. So, but in reality, many women had no choice, little or no choice. They were pressured by fear, by family, and by social expectation. Isn't it? So, the book and this chapter explains that what society strongly linked the honor to a woman's body. Woman का body बहुत important है, right? If a woman was raped or taken away, people believed the whole family and community were dishonored, right? Because of this thinking, what happened? Violence against women became permissible, right? In the name of protecting honor, even when women were survived assaults, they were often rejected or blamed, right? So many were told it would have been better if they had died. कभी कभी ये होता है ना, अगर तुम सरवाइव कर लिए तो अच्छा होता तुम मर जाते, राइट? सो मींस जी के बदनाम कर रही. So that's the kind of a dialogue. However, the authors also show that what not all women agreed, right? So some resisted even. So some refused to take poison or kill their children. So some chose to leave despite shame and danger, right? So their stories show that what courage and desire to survive. Their stories means show courage and desire to survive, even when society expected them to die or or kill themselves. In reality, women's lives were controlled by ideas of honor. Right. Violence against women was socially accepted during partition. So, in that case, most of the women did not accept this, isn't it? So suicides were called forcefully, and women's suffering was hidden behind the language of sacrifice. Right. So some women still resisted and chose life. So the authors want us to question the idea that these days were honorable, right? So they argue that this was a tragic result of what kind of a thinking? Patriarchal thinking. Patriarchal means what? Male dominated society. One gender dominates to the other gender, isn't it? Where women's bodies were treated as symbols of community pride rather than as human lives, isn't it? So, similar to that, when we go to the next section, we find out the author stated in the next section, it's called borders and bodies. Borders and bodies. So, recovering women in the interest of the what? Nation. So, and this topic explains how after the partition of India in 1947, the governments of India and Pakistan tried to do what? Recover women who had been abducted, separated, or forced into marriages and conversions during the violence. Right. Many families complained that their daughters, wives, or sisters were missing. So both governments made agreements and laws to find these women and return them to their original families and countries. Isn't it? At first, this recovery work look like a humanitarian effort, isn't it? Wow, India and Pakistan, they are doing very good job. That what? It's a humanitarian effort. In that humanitarian effort, means women were given the chances to return, women were given the chances to leave again. Right. But if you see that, it was presented as a saving women from suffering and bringing them back to safety. Special teams, police officers, social workers, they were appointed to search for women and transport, right, take them back to across the new borders. Thousands of women were recovered in this way, right? But the chapter showed that the issues was not only about helping women. You simply take the woman and get back to their original place is not the solution, isn't it? It was also about the honor and image of the new nation, isn't it? Women were seen as symbols of their community and religion. So, if a woman stayed in another community or country, people felt their community had lost honor. So, governments wanted to bring women back, not just for their own good, but to protect national and community pride. तो यहाँ पे एक चीज आ गया ना, तो पहले तो हमने ये कहा कि फैमिली, राइट, उसके बाद कहा कम्युनिटी, उसके बाद गवर्नमेंट ने एक ह्यूमैनिटेरियन एफर्ट दिखाया कि जो लोग दूसरे कंट्री में है या तो जो अपने कंट्री या तो अपने कम्युनिटी या तो अपने फैमिली के साथ ज्वाइन होने चाहते हैं, सो दे कैन कम, एंड फॉर दैट पुलिस एंड सोशल वर्कर्स दे डू द सर्विस, है कि नहीं? लेकिन उसके जरिए मीन्स लड़कियों को या तो वुमेन को जस्टिस मिला क्या? नहीं मिला, क्योंकि आपने तो उसको ले आए, लेकिन आपके दिमाग में रहता है ना, रामायण आपने देखा होगा, सीता भले ही रावण से छूटकर आ गई, लेकिन फिर भी मीन्स लोगों के दिमाग में डर मीन्स एक शक था कि क्या सीता ने बहुत दिन तक लंका में रहा है, ठीक है कि नहीं? तो ये जो स्टेटमेंट जिसके वजह से राम फोर्सफुली सीता को क्या किए, मीन्स एग्जाइल्ड किए, है कि नहीं? आर यू गेटिंग माई पॉइंट? तो वो जो एनालॉजी मैंने यहाँ पे दिया, मतलब कंपैरिजन दिया, तो दैट अप्लाइज हियर। गवर्नमेंट भी फील करता है कि उसके प्राइड के ऊपर है, कम्युनिटी भी कहता है कि ये बहुत दिन तक वहां पे रहा है तो उसके प्राइड के ऊपर है। सो इन दैट केस अगर देखा जाए, मीन्स honor and image of the new nation, women were seen as symbols of their community and religion. If a woman stayed in another community or country, people felt their community had lost honor. Agree? So, governments wanted to bring women back, not just for their own good, but to protect national and community pride. Right? So, many officials assume that all abducted women wanted to return, but this was not always true. सारे वुमेन चाहते हैं रिटर्न करने के लिए, लेकिन वो हमेशा सही नहीं होता है. Some women had started new lives, so marriages, and even they had also children. तो उस केस में क्या होगा? Some did not want to leave also. So, however, the law often did not give them a choice. Right. So the state decided for them. The state decided for them means यहाँ पे क्या हुआ? मैं अगर पार्टीशन हुआ है तो, और मैं अगर अपने कंट्री में जाके रहा हूँ, राइट, तो और वहां पे मेरा मैरिज हो चुका है, मेरे बच्चे हैं, तो ये जो लॉ आपने पार्टीशन के बाद बनाया, सो जिसकी वजह से आप चाहते हैं कि हमारे लड़कियां हमारे देश की इज्जत है, तो उनको आप घर बदलाना चाहते हैं, लेकिन वो अगर नहीं चाहते आने के लिए तो आपका लॉ फोर्स करता है कि नहीं? तो यहाँ पे लड़की का अपना ओपिनियन मैटर नहीं करता है, मैटर करता है किसका? ना कंट्री का, स्टेट का, ठीक है कि नहीं? वही यहाँ पे कहा गया, द स्टेट डिसाइडेड फॉर देम. इन सम केसेस women were taken away by force and sent across the border, and even if they resisted, भले ही वो फोर्स करे कि नहीं जाऊंगा, लेकिन फिर भी उनको फोर्सफुली सेंड किया जाए. So therefore, the book points out a big problem here, that what women were treated more as members of a religious community. तो यहाँ पे women को क्या religious community का एक member माना जाता है, right? Than as individual citizen with rights. उसके right का कोई value नहीं है. So their personal wishes were often ignored. The government acted like a guardian, जैसे parents है. So the government acted like a guardian or father, deciding what was best for them. उनके लिए क्या अच्छा होगा, क्या अच्छा नहीं होगा, उसके पापा मम्मी डिसाइड नहीं करेंगे, गार्डियन गवर्नमेंट डिसाइड. In doing so, it controlled women sexually. It controlled women sexually and family lives and supported traditional patriarchal ideals. वो सपोर्ट करता है मेल डोमिनेटेड आइडियल्स. सो जहां पे मेल डिसाइड करेंगे क्या होना चाहिए लड़की के साथ, क्या नहीं होना चाहिए. सो इन दैट केस अगर यहाँ पे कहा जाए रिकवरी, राइट, एंड डिस्प्लेसमेंट, और सॉरी रिकवरी एंड रिहैबिलिटेशन, वही कहा जा रहा है ना, रिकवरी एंड रिहैबिलिटेशन. तो रिकवरी ऑफ वुमेन वाज बोथ ह्यूमैनिटेरियन. रिकवरी किया गया वुमेन को, वो ह्यूमैनिटेरियन है, लेकिन वो पॉलिटिकल भी है, राइट. सो वुमेन्स बॉडीज बिकेम लिंक्ड टू नेशनल व्हाट, नेशनल ऑनर. तो यहाँ पे लड़की का अपना आइडेंटिटी नहीं है, नेशनल ऑनर इज मोर इम्पोर्टेंट देन इंडिविजुअल्स आइडेंटिटी. Many women were not allowed to choose their own future. So the state controlled women's lives in the name of the nation. Right. So borders and bodies. You find out the title. Borders and bodies means what? That national borders were just lines on a map. Not just lines on a map. Because अगर हम border कहें तो हमारा एक पर्टिकुलर बाउंड्री है, हम कहते हैं, है कि नहीं. सो एंड वो बाउंड्री मैप में दिखाता है कि हमारा देश इतना तक लिमिटेड है, उसका टेरिटोरियल इतना तक है, ठीक है कि नहीं. लेकिन मीन्स जब हम बॉर्डर्स एंड बॉडीज के बारे में कहते हैं, द दैट नेशनल बॉर्डर्स वर नॉट जस्ट लाइंस ऑन अ मैप, they also affected women's bodies and women's lives, isn't it? So women became a place where ideas of religion, understand that author ने क्या क्या है, women became a place, एक जगह है, right, where ideas of religion, ideas of honor and ideas of nationalism, so those were fought over. जिसको लेके क्या होता है, जिस हम जगह को लेके केस करते हैं ना, इस जगह के ऊपर क्या होना चाहिए, क्या नहीं होना चाहिए, ये हमारे ऊपर है, हम इसके ओनर है. तो उसी हिसाब से ऑथर ने वुमेन को मेटाफोरिकली डायरेक्टली कंपेयर किया है प्लेसेस के साथ, और बोला है कि इस वुमेन को जगह के हिसाब से लेके उसके ऊपर रिलीजन, उसके ऊपर नेशनलिज्म, उसके ऊपर ऑनर, राइट, को लेके फाइट होता था, राइट. सो द therefore you can say the chapter asks us to think what was this really rescue. गवर्नमेंट ने कहा है कि रेस्क्यू कर रहे हैं हम लड़की, राइट और नॉट, and it shows us a humanitarian ground. So or is it another form of control? ये और एक फॉर्म ऑफ कंट्रोल हुआ ना. कंट्रोल किसके ऊपर, लड़कियों के ऊपर, है कि नहीं. So that is what you would find out. Even if you talk about the next one, which is called a community of widows, the next one, which is stated about a community of widows, you would find out that many of the missing citizens are there. So community of widows, missing citizens, ये जो chapter है, this chapter talks about the large number of women, right, who became widows during the partition of India 1947. Why? Because of riots. Riots का मतलब क्या होता है? दंगा, RIOTS. Because of killing, because of the migration, many men died or went missing. Right? बहुत सारे लोग मर गए या तो मिसिंग हो गए. As a result, you find out that thousands of women were left alone without husbands, protection or financial support. इन लड़कियों को तो कोई प्रोटेक्शन नहीं है, कोई फाइनेंशियल सपोर्ट नहीं है, उनका हस्बैंड भी मर गए हैं रियर्स में. राइट. सो दीज वुमेन वेर कॉल्ड कम्युनिटी ऑफ विडोज. राइट. सो कम्युनिटी ऑफ विडोज मतलब विडोज का एक कम्युनिटी. विडोज समझ में आता है. सो बिकॉज देयर सफरिंग वाज शेयर एंड वाइड स्प्रेड. उनका जो सफरिंग है वो अपने एक दूसरे के साथ बांट सकते हैं. Right. So after partition, the government noticed that many widows were homeless, poor, and helpless. And these women were not like abducted. Right. क्योंकि abducted women, raped women, they were considered shame. But the women who were widows, so they are not like abducted women. Widows were not seen as a problem of honor. है कि नहीं? कि वो तो ऑनर के प्रॉब्लम नहीं है ना. सो बट आज विक्टिम्स ऑफ नेशनल डिजास्टर. इसे कहा जाता है कि पार्टीशन में जो मर गए लोग रियट के बेस पे, उसे कहा जाता है नेशनल डिजास्टर. सो नेशनल डिजास्टर का मतलब क्या होता है कि मीन्स जैसे कि कोई एक अर्थक्वेक हो गया, बहुत सारे लोग मर गए. राइट. सो पैंडेमिक हुआ, बहुत सारे लोग मर गए. इजंट इट? सो उस हिसाब से अगर देखा जाए इसको नेशनल डिजास्टर कहा, क्योंकि बहुत सारे वुमेन विडोज हैं. सो द स्टेट ट्राइड टू हेल्प देम थ्रू रिहैबिलिटेशन प्रोग्राम. इजंट इट? सो and how they were given shelter, they were given training, they were given jobs, sometimes jobs, so they could become independent and survive on their own. Right. So but the chapter explains that what widows were treated differently from abducted women. Widows were allowed to rebuild their lives. Right. And were supported to become citizens who could work and contribute to society. So their rights as citizens were not questioned as much. तो वो तो देश के लड़की हैं, वो भी एक सिटीजन है, तो उनके सिटीजन्स को लेके क्वेश्चन नहीं होता था इतना. मतलब कहीं ना कहीं क्वेश्चन होता था, बट इतना नहीं होता था कंपैरिजन विद द abducted, raped. Right. So the government helped them learn skill, find employment, live with dignity. However, even though help was given, their emotional pain was very deep. आपको सब कुछ मिल जाएगा, लेकिन वो जो हस्बैंड, चिल्ड्रन, उनका जो अफेक्शन वो मिलेगा क्या? So in that case, their emotional pain was very deep. Many widows had lost not just their husband, but also homes. Right? So families and communities. So they carried memories of violence and loss. इस हिसाब से उनके सामने उनके हस्बैंड को मारा गया, उनके बच्चों को जला दिया गया. Isn't it? So their identity changed suddenly from wives and family members to lonely survivors, widows. Isn't it? So, therefore, when you say the title of this chapter, Missing Citizens, isn't it? They stated, no, missing citizens. So, when the title says missing citizens, that shows an important idea that these women were physically present, but they are socially almost invisible. Socially वो नहीं थे, क्योंकि उनका खुद का कम्युनिटी था. They were in a pain. They were actually present, but not solely. Right. So they had lost their place in family and society. So the state had to step in because there was no one else to support them. In this way, the government became what? Their protector and their provider. क्योंकि गवर्नमेंट ही उनको जॉब देता था, गवर्नमेंट ही उनको लर्न मीन्स ट्रेनिंग देता था, गवर्नमेंट ही उनको मीन्स एजुकेट करता था, है कि नहीं? सो इन in that way, you can say the chapter, this particular chapter, tells us that partition created a huge number of widows, right? So, partition, because of the partition, women suffered loss, women suffered poverty, women suffered loneliness. So, even the government tried to rehabilitate and support them, but widows were treated more as citizens than as symbols of honor. Right. So their struggle was about survival. So, जी रहे and dignity, self-respect. So overall, if you say a community of widows, क्योंकि ये पूरा chapter communities of widows के ऊपर है. So that shows the human cost of action. So it reminds us that what behind political events are real people whose lives are deeply affected, right? So these widows were missing citizens. These widows were missing citizens because they had to rebuild their identity and place in a new nation after losing almost everything. Okay. Okay. Coming to the next one. The next one is indicating about picking up the pieces, woman rehabilitation woman, right? Woman rehabilitation woman. So when we say that picking up the pieces, woman rehabilitate woman, so this gives us the idea that after the trauma of a partition, women did not suffer, right? Women did not suffer or did not only suffer. Many of them also became helpers and rebuilders. Helpers and rebuilders. So when thousands of women were left homeless, widowed, abducted, or separated from their families, it was often other women who stepped forward to support them, isn't it? And these women worked in camps, these women worked in camps, CMPS, ashramas, right? Camps, ashramas, and rehabilitation centers, right? So, and helping survivors also rebuild their lives. क्योंकि एक लड़की को एक लड़की समझ सकती है. तो यहाँ पे जो कहा गया है कि women rehabilitate women, it means जो women abducted, raped, widowed हैं, right? So their identity was loose. So they were suffering. They were separated from the families, right? So who will support them? Widows के लिए government है, लेकिन government cannot, means fulfill the emotion part. So therefore, women were there who work in camps, ashrams, rehabilitation centers. They support. Right. So, and helping these survivors slowly to rebuild their lives, isn't it? So, many of these helpers were volunteers, right? So, social workers, or you can say women connected to organization. What are the organizations? They generally worked. अभी भी है कुछ YMCA, right? YMCA, okay. So, Christian Church. So even All India Women's Conference, right? So AIWC, right? Service groups, some were educated and from comfortable families, while others were themselves victims of partitions. But they all said a strong sense of duty and compassion. मतलब कुछ लोग हैं जो कि विक्टिम हैं, कुछ लोग हैं जो कि बहुत बड़े बड़े फैमिली से आए हैं लेकिन वॉलंटरली को सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं. जो लोग विक्टिम्स है वो भी कैंप्स में है, रिहैबिलिटेशन सेंटर में है, आश्रम से, वो बाकी लड़कियों को हेल्प कर, ठीक है कि नहीं? तो उस हिसाब से देखा जाए, they felt that in such a national crisis they must help other women stand up and stand up again, isn't it? So therefore, if I say their work included, means ये जो women है volunteers हैं, एंड ये जो वुमेन है जो कि मीन्स क्या करते हैं, मीन्स हेल्प करते हैं वुमेन को. सो हाउ डू दे हेल्प? दे हेल्प देम बाय गिविंग शेल्टर. जगह चाहिए रहने के लिए लड़कियों को. सो दे गिव देम द शेल्टर, फूड, प्रोवाइडिंग मेडिकल केयर, टीचिंग स्किल्स एंड एजुकेशन. पढ़ाते हैं, ट्रेनिंग देते हैं, हमने देखा है. सो हेल्पिंग वुमेन टू फाइंड जॉब्स. सो इवन अरेंजिंग चाइल्ड केयर. तो किसी का कोई जॉब में जा रहा है तो उसके बच्चे को केयर देने के लिए भी कभी कभी यूज किया जाता है. सो अरेंजिंग चाइल्ड केयर, समटाइम्स अरेंजिंग मैरिजेस फॉर ऑर्फेन्ड और अनअटैच्ड वुमेन. राइट. सो कभी कभी सती प्रथा तो हट गया था ना, तो उस हिसाब से अगर देखा जाए, मीन्स द एम वाज टू मेक वुमेन इंडिपेंडेंट. लड़कियों को इंडिपेंडेंट बनाना. सो दे कुड अर्न एंड लिव विद डिग्निटी. अपने सेल्फ रेस्पेक्ट के साथ वो कमा भी सके, जी भी सके. राइट. सो मेनी वुमेन वर ट्रेन्ड इन क्राफ्ट्स. क्राफ्ट्स मतलब समझ में आता है आर्ट एंड क्राफ्ट. सो क्राफ्ट, नर्सिंग, टीचिंग एंड अदर वर्क, सो दे कुड सपोर्ट देमसेल्व्स. However, this chapter also explains that what this work was not simple. ये इतना इजी भी नहीं था, है कि नहीं? Social workers had to balance what? Sympathy with the social rules. क्योंकि आप किसी को दया तो कर सकते हो, जैसे कि आप एक रूसी को कुछ पैसे तो दे सकते हो, बट आपका बाउंड्रीज है, लिमिटेड, आप उससे ज्यादा नहीं दे सकते, है कि नहीं? तो सिमिलर टू दैट, you can help me, but there is a boundary, right? There is a rule, there are rules, right? So you can show me the sympathy, but you can't give your life for me, isn't it? So that is why the chapter explains that this work was not simple. Social workers had to balance sympathy with social rules. So they wanted to protect women, but they also worked within traditional ideas, right? About respectability and honor. About respectability and honor. For example, some believed marriage could protect a vulnerable woman from exploitation. अगर एक लड़की जो कि विधवा है, अगर वो फिर से मैरिज हो जाता है, तो दूसरे उसको परेशान नहीं करेंगे, सोशल एक्सप्लॉयटेशन होगा नहीं, right or not? So at the same time, many try to respect women's choices and emotional needs, isn't it? So लेकिन हमें ये भी जानना है कि वो लड़की क्या चाहती है कि नहीं? तो उस हिसाब से अगर देखा जाए, means some social workers became deeply affected by the pain they saw. Listening to stories of violence and loss was emotionally heavy. Let's say that एक घर में husband अपने wife को बहुत ही मीन्स बुरी तरह से मार रहा है, राइट? तो उसके साथ सेपरेट होने के बाद तो दूसरी बार कभी सोचे कि नहीं कि मैं मैरिज करूं, ठीक है कि नहीं? तो क्योंकि वो सफर कर चुका है कि नहीं? तो दैट्स व्हाट यू वुड फाइंड आउट. लिसनिंग टू स्टोरीज ऑफ वायलेंस एंड लॉस वाज इमोशनली हेवी. बट कभी कभी ये जो सोशल वर्कर्स हैं वो कोशिश करते हैं कि दूसरी बार शादी हो जाए, सो या तो मीन्स कुछ ये हो जाए, बट दे डू नॉट वांट yet. But many continued because they believed they were helping women move toward a new life. So over time, strong bonds, time के हिसाब से बहुत strong bonds बन जाते हैं. Some women even saw these workers as mother figures. कुछ लड़कियां तो उसे माँ के हिसाब से भी देखते हैं, है कि नहीं? So अगर देखा जाए, this gives us the idea that how women helped the other women, right? Even recover after partition. Second is called as a rehabilitation, was about dignity and independence, self-respect and independence. Third is called as a social workers showed courage and dedication. So their work mixed care, discipline, and social expectation. Right. Even women played a big role in our, you can say, rebuilding lives after disaster. Right. So overall, you can say when you say picking of the pieces, तो यहाँ पे pieces किसको रेफर किया गया है? वुमेन को. राइट? क्यों पीसेस कहा गया है? क्योंकि पार्टीशन के बाद उनका कोई वजूद नहीं, सो दे वर सेपरेटेड from their soul to the body. So their husbands died, or maybe they were raped, they were abducted, families were separated, right? Even society doesn't accept them, right? So even they were uh, coming back to their own land, isn't it? So they were living in a widow communities, isn't it? So in that case, you would find out they were picking up pieces, they were pieces. And these pieces were picked by the social workers, the women, isn't it? Rehabilitate to women, isn't it? So therefore, means if you talk about picking up the pieces chapter, highlights the woman's strength and solidarity, right? दूसरे के लिए अपना compassion, kindness. So even in a time of great tragedy, women supported each other and helped create new beginnings. So it shows that women were not just victims of history, they were also healers and rebuilders. So हमने क्या पढ़ा? हमने पढ़ा कि means women were means victims of the history. लेकिन यही women है जो कि टाइम के साथ ये प्रॉब्लम को भी हील किए हैं, अपने आप को भी रीबिल्ड किए हैं, राइट, इन द सोसाइटी और रीबिल्डिंग ऑफ द सोसाइटी. Isn't it? I hope you understood this. Now, let's go to the next one that's called a journey. Huh? Sure. और दो है, और दो यूनिट है. We'll complete this and we'll. The next story is learning to survive. Next chapter. So at least you can write a lengthy question on this, right? दिमाग में कुछ आ जाएगा. हाँ? So the next one is called as a learning to survive. Right? Learning to survive, two lives, two destinies, isn't it? This is the penultimate chapter. So, and this chapter explains what, or this chapter tells what? The stories of two women. Now we read the history. Now we are getting some factual details, some two stories that went through their life during the partition. So the two women who lived through the partition of India, and these two stories tells us that how the same historical event can lead to very different lives, right? So the focus is on how women learned to survive after losing their homes, security, and familiar world, right? So here you find out one of the women is Bibi in the Kaur. Bibi in the Kaur. Bibi in the INDER in the Kaur. KUR. So one of the women is Bibi in the Kaur used the crisis of partition as a chance to, you can say, change her life. Right. So before partition, she lived within the limits of a traditional household and had fewer opportunities. So after migration, life was difficult for her, but she decided to study, she decided to work and become independent. She continued her education, became a teacher, and later a college principal. We talk about Bibi in the car, right? So, but and built a stable life for herself and her daughters. She believed that partition, though painful, gave her the chance to step outside the four walls. isn't it? Now, understand that I'm talking about the traditional life she was living. And after partition, she got the chance of going out from the four walls, isn't it? So, of her home and create her own future. So, like Bibi in the core, we also find out another one which called as a Somabanti. Right. So the other woman, Somabanti, who had a very different journey. How? Now she remembered her life before partition as full of love, full of comfort, and strong community ties. It means called that her life was better before partition, isn't it? Before partition. So, but after partition, what happened? She faced loss. She faced poverty, daridra, we call it, poverty, and she also suffered from emotional pain, isn't it? So her husband could not adjust. Her husband could not means adjust and let her die. Who's we talk about Somabanti. So, and she had to struggle daily just to sustain, just to survive. Who? Somabanti. So, she worked long hours doing sewing and housework. Sewing, you understand? Stitching, tailoring. Right, sewing, tailoring. So, with no time to rest or think, for her, the happiness of the past never returned. Right? Whose happiness of the past? Somabanti. Never returned. She often felt unsettled. Who felt unsettled? Somabanti. Felt unsettled. Unsettled means after partition we were talking about. So she felt unsettled. She carried the sadness throughout her life. Right. So through these two stories, you would find out. Through these two stories means one is called as a cow, right? So what's her name? Irbal Kaur. And another one is called as Somabanti. PB Irbal Kaur. Isn't it? Another one is Somabanti. So what the difference you find out? You find out two contrasting situation. How two contrasting situation? BB Irbal Kaur, right? Life was traditional before partition. It means she was not given the opportunity of going outside, living a, means of independent life that she could live after partition. Isn't it? She means educated herself, she became principal, isn't it? So, but at the same time, when you talk about Somabanti, we found out how Somabanti life was means terrible after partition. She felt before partition her life was better. Love, affection, family, everything was there. But after partition, what happened? She struggled for surviving, isn't it? So, in that case, the authors saw that partition affected women in different ways. Some women found new strength and independence. So, while others were deeply hurt and never fully recovered, isn't it? So, survival was not only about staying alive, survival was what? About adjusting emotionally, socially, and economically. Okay. So, in that case, partition changed women's lives in very personal ways. So, some women gained independence and confidence. Some women faced lifelong sorrow and struggle. Some women means even considered survival meant working hard. अगर जीना है, तो you have to work hard. You have to adapt. You have to continue despite what? Despite pain. भले ही आपको कष्ट हो रहा हो, लेकिन आपको क्या करना है? कंटिन्यू करना है, isn't it? So therefore, the title Two Lives, Two Destinies. Two lives, two destinies. That reminds us that history doesn't treat everyone in the same manner. Right? Even in the same situation, people futures can turn out very differently. But both women showed courage in their own ways, isn't it? So both women continue to live. Both women care for their families. both women move forward even after great loss. Great loss. Isn't it? I hope you understand these two examples and if possible you apply them. Then the last one which we find out is called as a belonging, woman and their nation. Belonging, woman and their nation. So this is the last chapter and this chapter talks about what? The idea of belonging. Where and how women felt where and how women felt they belonged after the partition of India. Partition did not just divide land into India and Pakistan, it also broke people's sense of home. People's sense of home, identity, and security. So, for many women, belonging was not only about country. ऐसा नहीं है कि मैं country के साथ attached हूँ. It is about family, where with whom they are living. So it is about the community and relationship. So before partition, many women felt they belonged to their homes, villages, and close communities where people knew and cared for each other. After partition, what happened? They were forced to leave these familiar places. Now, the, there was a time when we become the brothers, and there is a time when we become the intruders, and you forced me to get out from my land. Isn't it? So that's what they lost not only property but also friendships, neighborhoods, and a feeling of being rooted somewhere. Even create enemies. दुश्मन भी हो गए जो दोस्त थे है कि नहीं so many women felt that their real country was the one they had left behind right so because that was where their memories and emotion means lie or tie right so that is why if you talk about that the last chapter explains that what women's identity was often decided by others, by family, community, religion, and the state. Women were seen as careers of community honor and tradition. And because of this, their belonging was linked to religion and nationality. आप Muslim हो, you will go to Pakistan. आप हिंदू हो, आप इंडिया में जाओ. है कि नहीं? तो religion के साथ link हुआ कि नहीं? So, second is called as identity and identity that were questioned. So, if they crossed borders through marriage, अगर आप शादी करके एक border cross करके वहां चले गए तो और या तो abduct हुआ और या तो migration किए है कि नहीं तो your loyalty and your identity were questioned कितना honest हो क्योंकि मीन्स आप जितने भी ऑनेस्ट आप पाकिस्तान के प्रति मतलब मुस्लिम है फिर भी पाकिस्तान में घुस रहा हूं फिर भी दे आर डाउटिंग ऑन माय लॉयल्टी अरे ये इंडिया से आया है isn't it so sometimes women were treated more as members of a religious group than as individual citizens with right so the authors show that what belonging for women was complicated लड़कियों के लिए कनेक्शन ढूंढना बहुत कॉम्प्लिकेटेड था so a woman could be a citizen of a nation but still feel like she belonged to nowhere some women built new lives some women built new lives slowly felt connected to their new country others never felt settled and always desired for their own so the pain of separation, the pain of loss stayed with them for years and years and years. Isn't it? At the same time, partition also pushed many women into new roles. They started working, studying, and supporting families. That is the summing up. So, this gave some women a new sense of identity. This gave some women the identity and place in a society. So, belonging was not only about loss. Belonging is all about, for some, it also meant creating a new space. Right? आप immediately कहीं पे जाके settle नहीं हो सकते, है कि नहीं? So you need some time. You need to create your new space for yourself. In simple words, you can say that what एक marriage जब होता है arranged marriage, एक लड़की एक लड़के के घर में एडजस्ट करने के लिए टाइम मिलता है कि नहीं? टाइम लगता है. So that's what. And this chapter tells us the same, that belonging is about more than personality, right? But it is about home and relationship. Many women felt rootless after partition. तो पार्टीशन के बाद तुम्हारा रूट ही नहीं है. रूट का मतलब तुम्हारा फादर फोर फादर दूसरे कंट्री में, तो आपने फिर से अपना नया परंपरा, नया what you say, that generation create, isn't it? So women's identity was often controlled by community and religion, that we understood. Some women rebuilt their senses of belonging through work and independence. Overall, you can talk about belonging tells us that what women and their nations, right? Women belonging का मतलब क्या है? Women and their nations. So that partition affected women's hearts as much as their homes. Right? It reminds us that a nation is not just land on a map. It is also where people feel safe and valued, connected and connected. So for many women, finding that feeling again was the hardest journey of all, isn't it? So that's what you would find out uh, about the topic called borders and boundaries. Right. Hope you understood, huh? Chalo. So, you understood the author, right? Ritu Menon is an Indian feminist writer and scholar. Actually, if you talk about Ritu Menon, means what do you find out here? She is one of India's first feminist publisher, female के लिए. उसके साथ और एक लड़की है, that called as a Kali, co-founder, right? Co-founder of Kali for Women. Uh, no, not actually. Sorry, I pointed. She is the co-founder of Kali. Kali is, you can say that Kali for Women. It's one of the publishing houses, right? Her work focuses on gender, women's rights, and social justice. Uh, so she helped actually collect and analyze women's oral histories. Oral histories कहा जाए तो बॉर्डर एंड बाउंड्रीज में जो लड़कियां इंटरव्यूज देते थे, सो उनका हिस्ट्री को ओरली कलेक्ट किया था फ्रॉम, एंड जिनको हम कह सकते हैं पार्टीशन सर्वाइवर्स, isn't it? So therefore Ritu Menon works gives importance to women's voices that are often missing from, mainstream mainstream history, because no other authors have given that highlight. Even if you talk about next one, it's Kamla Bhasin. Kamla Bhasin also was a well-known feminist activist, writer, and educator in South Asia. She also worked for women's empowerment and gender equality. She was active in India, Pakistan, Nepal, and Bangladesh also. She wrote many books and poems on feminism in simple language. So she conducted workshops and campaigns to spread awareness about gender justice. So these two authors, they're focused on women's lived experiences, right? Uh, so that's why they did the oral history and interviews. They showed that how partition affected women differently than men. They also brought feminist goal, females' goal into historical writing. So they wanted history to include real voices of, and not just political events and male leaders. So they changed partition history from political history to human and woman centered history, right? Not human, that called as a woman centered history. That's fine. That's all for the day. I hope you feel tired, right? And also you understood, right? Thank you. We'll meet in the next class with a new topic.